Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick check. Satish, Bharat, or somebody, can you just confirm? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen. Just give me one moment. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. Again, good morning and good evening, everyone. This session, it's more on what we call as the application or the themes around what we call as the conversational insights. I'll explain more of it in a bit, but more than that, this is one of the areas which we are going to focus on today is more around leveraging this technology or applications or solutions around this technology primarily for operational decision making, and then I'll give you quite a bit of examples on the installations which we have done, where talk about some of the use cases which some of our customers are um, doing today and all that, right? So with that, very, very brief intro. So this is just a quick introduction on, about Highland Digital and us. There's a boutique of companies focused on different technology areas. So where I come in, it's around Purple Slate. We focus on an area specific to conversational AI, technologies, primarly using text and voices and interface, a lot of the natural language understanding related stuff, chatbots, smart assistants, and um, so those are, and again, majority of them are built on top of Microsoft Azure cognitive services, which again, I'll just briefly touch upon today. Right? So that's myself. I'm one of the co-founder, and I'm responsible for the product management as well as the engineering aspects of the technology within this firm. Pretty much spent a major part of my career into the Wall Street with Bank of New York Mellon and a few other institutions on the technology side. And then we are doing this startup, like almost 50 and now, are building platforms around this technology. And significant, again, significant portion of my experience has been with working with data, business intelligence to big data, data science, a lot of machine learning applications, around on the financial industry side and all that, right? So that's me. Um, so just to set the context for today's discussion. So, especially for people who have extensive experience, or rather, who have used BI related technologies and all that, right? I mean, um, who've been using data, for decision making and for reporting and all that. See, this is one very important statistics, which is which I thought would set the context for us, for this discussion. Majority of our time today, especially in enterprises, spent on getting access to the data, or rather, if you really need a piece of information for decision making or any reporting, I think there is a good amount of effort. It is not as seamless as possible. Whether it is the access to the data or the kind of metrics, and so there is a statistics, from research which says 20 to 30% of the time, people normally spend looking for information. This is purely from a enterprise, perspective, right? But think about the other side. Today, day-to-day life revolves around the popular search engine. Whether it is Bing, Google, or anything and everything today, we are extremely comfortable, or invariably, we move towards, asking the search engine, right? So you have this contrasting experience, one side, for every other information, that information access has become that much more easy, simple, as well as a lot more powerful. At the same time, do we have the same experience on the enterprise side? It's some companies have done it really well, but at the same time, overall, it has been a problem, which definitely requires attention, especially with the way the technologies are happening, maturing. There are definitely opportunities for us to replicate a similar experience, within the enterprise, right? So if I have to sum it up, or just to set the context for today's session, right? I think this is something which I would put it. So today's information needs are, I mean, since it's basically, can I really have a platform which is where I can trust my insights? Just a platform, which is used by users across user persona. I mean, different people have different information needs, starting from your senior management to the operation managers, line managers, to everybody. I mean, everyone has different information need. Can there be a platform, which takes care of these? And at the same time, the data grows at scale. I mean, definitely every, none of us we delete. I mean, we delete nothing. The data growth has been growing exponentially. How are we going to have a similar experience, with a very, very large volume of data at the same time? When I say makes sense, one aspect of it, which is really becoming very popular, or rather getting a lot of attention these days for right reasons, it's around the metadata. What exactly is this data? Do people really understand every data element on what they're really consuming, why they are consuming, and all that? Right? So with that, I'll just get so again, before we delve into the technology or the application side of it. I mean, just to set the context, there are three areas, which I just want to briefly touch upon, to help us appreciate this, the problem space, as well as how we are really trying to address that, with the conversational insights technology, which we're going to talk about. So the reality of today's data-rich world, or rather, the digital world, it's ever increasing, data sets. Almost as I said, nobody deletes anything these days, and it's a question of big data. The definition of big data itself is changing. Every company, especially with the increasing digital transmission efforts, they are accumulating tons of data, right? So, but at the same time, while a data-rich or a modern digital company doesn't mean they have that data really contributes to whether it is the information access or decision making and all. Still, there is a contrasting thing, where the information is still not readily available for users for decision making and all that, right? And the third point, which is that's what I really want to highlight. I mean, that is more of a new requirement, which is coming up in this generation. What we call is the momentary data needs. Say today, if I for anything else, for my personal needs, just to want to check the score or check the weather, anything, we are ready immediately, ready to, go and check the search engine. What if, I mean, for similar scenarios, even within an enterprise, right? I think that's where the struggle is. For everything else, for outside work, we have, everything we're going to ask the search engine. But why not, I mean, the similar experience, even within the enterprise and all that, right? And the BI tool sets, especially when you take large enterprises and all that, I mean, there are like n number of tool sets, each one of them serving its own purpose. I mean, obviously, definitely, there is a need. But at the same time, there is just what we call as the proliferation of so many different tools, and then of course, which leads to increasing operational costs and all that. And the sixth point is also definitely a reality, in the sense there is statistical, or rather even market research. So many research reports continue to mention that the data and BI and analytic projects, there is always a questionable ROI on these projects. Many of them really struggle. Why is that? I think that definitely it's very, very common problem across the industry, right? And the other thing is, while as much as we consume, sorry, I think I just jumped. Just give me one second. So as much as we consume the data, which is through different dashboards, reports, and all that, what they in turn help us with is answering questions. Even if I'm looking at a metric, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get an answer for a question I have in my mind, through a metric, or rather, interpreting a report or an Excel sheet or whatever it is, right? It could be something like this. What pages do users spend? If we have rolled out a website, definitely, when I'm looking at a Google Analytics page, or I would definitely like to know what is the page hit by? How many new users did I get last month? And what channels are they using? Are they coming through the website, or are they coming through a mobile phone and all that? So all these questions is what we have in our mind, which we're really trying to get an answer. At the end of the day, that's why we even going after the data, right? The second thing is the modern day data needs. It's also, it has its own, it brings its own variation, and then its own challenges. As I said, very high large volume of data. How do we get access to this data for our need, right? And access at this particular moment, just like how we would ask a search engine. I mean, not like after days or weeks and all that. I mean, definitely at this particular moment, I have, say, I'm in front of a customer, or I'm in a meeting where we are talking about, a cost aspect of it. At that particular moment, um, do we really have access to all the data we need at that moment, right? So, all these are, I mean, they especially the point number four there. I mean, at the end of the day, when we have a metric, definitely there is a follow up. We work with somebody else. There is a need for us to collaborate on all this, right? So, how do we achieve all this today in today's scenario, right? I mean, given the data environment, or the digital ecosystem we have. And just to give set some context, and think about it this way. This is a very interesting statistics, which I like. It came in one of the research recently. Everything else in our life, it's kind of shrinks. I mean, so I can order something in DoorDash in a few minutes. I can get my food delivered. I can hail a cab, in absolutely no time, right? Including even if we take long distance travel through some of the fastest planes and all that. But at the same time, they just try to contrast this to getting access to data. I mean, getting a dashboard or a report, still it's extremely painful in many places, right? I think so. Basically, the underlying message is more like the technologies or the way in which we get access to information still has not caught up with the speed of our all our other needs for the modern data world, right? I think so. This is more of a very, very interesting perspective, which I saw. I thought, okay, it will be useful here, right? So now the problem space is this: how do we make the enterprise data available for everyone's use? I mean, very similar to, as I said, going back to the search engine example. So, I mean, if we have to bring that within the enterprise, how do we really make that available for everyone to use in a very, very simple, interface, right? So again, some more context, in terms of because since we are talking about conversational AI solutions, I thought, okay, there is just few slides, some context around the conversational AI and the related cognitive services solutions, right? So this is the way the conversational AI solutions have really matured. Can it really talk, text, or chat? Can I really talk to an interface and then ask those questions? So definitely the interface modes and voice and text are maturing enough. I think that's what is being heavily used these days. And when we talk about human conversations, especially voice or text, right? The key thing is how good is the language understanding part? Can it really understand what I'm saying and then respond back? Say if I ask a question, hey, show me the sales in the last quarter. Right? Does it even understand what I'm really asking for? And then for it to even for the application to even respond back. So that you have technologies around language understanding, playing this role, and then the maturity of those, right? Can it learn continuously? Here we're really talking about machine learning applications, right? So sometimes if it doesn't understand, if your models are only as good as how much you have trained it, with various utterances and all that. And then, so all these models, just like human learning, I mean, none of us are perfect, none of us know everything, right? So as we learn, as we mature, the similar pattern has to be applied even for the machine learning models. So do they have the ability to get the feedback and learn on a continuous basis so that it can mature continuously, right? Does it know? I mean, this is the most important part. I mean, one is understanding and learning and all that. At the same time, it has to respond back when I ask this question. Hey, show me the sales last quarter. can it really provide me that answer, which I'm really looking for? So definitely getting access to, or rather, does it have the knowledge base to respond back, with the right information and data and all that? And can it be, at the end of the day, that's the most important part. When I ask a question, I may want to take a decision, or I may want to, collaborate with somebody else and all that. Can it really be useful? And then, does it support actions, right? So even within this context, I would also talk about, especially trying to position conversational insights. For many of you, who've been in this industry, I think, you would know this. It's a very high level summary of how information systems have matured over a period of time. We starting with the legacy mainframe computers. We had the reports, as more and more business processes were getting, done by computers, so you had these, the reports being produced. That's the way, we were consuming information. And you can also see on the x-axis, it's the reduction in the time, to do some of these stuff. And then, you had spreadsheets, with the advent of personal computers and all that. So it started from whatever it took these weeks. Now, it gets done in like, days, hours and all that. And then now, the evolution of the business intelligence reports, dashboards and all that. And you had the smartphones revolution, really triggering all of us, we spend a good amount of time in the smartphones. And most of the applications today, they are available on the mobile. We are able to get access to information and all that, right? But the next stage, which we are really seeing is, more like when for something like a momentary information, when with the continuous shrinkage of time, where we really need this information right now, like as I said, how we are going to a search engine for all our personal data needs. For some similar experience within an enterprise, for our information needs, how would that be, that experience, right? That's what, we're really calling it as, I think, an approach using conversational insights could be the answer to it, right? I think this is just one way of, putting it in terms of how the different technologies have emerged over a period of time, and the future could potentially be, getting access to momentary information needs through a conversational platform. Right. And the other reason why we feel, this particular technology around conversation insights could be a lot more useful is the way humans, we consume information. Say, for example, if I have an answer, or rather, I need an answer, I have a question. Like the example I just gave you, okay, what is my sales last quarter, right? What do I do? It's like I get an answer. So that might trigger a follow-up question, right? I think, say, for example, I'm looking at a number and say that, hey, can you show me the trend? Can we just go back 6 more months and then, look at it? So, and then, it triggers a follow-up question. See, in fact, this is very similar to your knowledge assimilation cycle. In fact, as they say, as you learn more, in fact, one clear indication of you becoming more knowledgeable is it providing you more questions and even answers, right? I think so that kind of, the way you consume information, right? You start with a question, you ask it, that triggers a follow up, and then, you get more answers. This kind of, pattern is very much possible with a conversation interface, or rather, conversation insights. I'll show you a few examples very soon, right? So that's why, that's also one reason why we think, this is the way humans, we seek out information. So this kind of pattern is very much tuned to conversational way of consuming information. So that's one of the reasons why I think conversation insights could be very much suited for rather very much in tune with how humans we normally would have consumed information. So the other thing is also, right, say for example, today in the absence of a computer, right, if I really have a question, I would go and ask somebody who really knows the answer. And then, I get the answer. Maybe, I have a follow-up. This is the way, I kind of engage in a conversation with somebody, right? So this, with asking a trusted source, getting the answers, and then as I said, the question answer leading to more questions kind of happens in a cycle till we feel enlightened or till we feel we have all the answers. And then, we use those answers, to take actions or decision making, right? I think this is the way, humans kind of, we really assimilate information or and then, become knowledgeable on something. So in fact, For many of you, who have worked on the business intelligence space, there is this area which has been very popular for some, called the service analytics. Using tools like whether it is Power BI or Tableau or any of those tools, or even Excel for that matter, Microsoft Excel for that matter. Right? Any data analyst would be continuously, just slicing and dicing data and looking at it from different perspectives across different dimensions, measures, till they get all the answers. And then they kind of put together these answers in a logical pattern, which helps them either use it for a presentation or decision making and all that, right? So now imagine if this is the way, we've been consuming information. How could this be? It's I'm sorry, is that a question? I hear some. Okay, good. So with this expectation, but look at what we have today, right? So some of the challenges. One is, what we call as death by metrics. See, it's you take any reasonably sized organizations that would definitely be, at least be more Excel sheets, more reports and dashboards than even the number of people who work there. I think, this is a very, very common reality in many of the organizations. There is one dashboard giving us the data. There is another report which gives us the data. None of them really match. And in addition to that, on top of it, people would still be crunching their own numbers in an Excel sheet and all that. I think this is a very, very common scenario in any of the organizations. So what we call is dead by metrics, right? The second challenge, or rather, which is still very much true, is the information access is still too technical. Ranging from query language tools to trying to interpret different metrics in a dashboard and all that. I think many of them is not, especially for non-technical users or business users, there is still a good amount of complexity involved in, with respect to the technology part of it, right? Either you have to write some scripts or play around with spreadsheets. All these things are definitely, very, very common across these days. It's not like where I just go and ask somebody, right? It is not definitely not as seamless or simple as that, right? Very again, another very common pain point, which I'm sure many of you we could relate to. It's the painful delays. Say you have a dashboard, you have a scorecard or a report. If you need something, definitely you might be engaging a data analyst team, send them emails back and forth, till you really get the answers. There is a good amount of nothing is quote unquote what I would call as the pure self-service, right? This box which I have highlighted, asking a trusted source. It could be your data analyst team, or it could be somebody at the technology team, or it could even be yourself. Doing pretty much all the work yourself. Collecting the data till trying to get the insights out of a dashboard or a report. Definitely, it's a very, very painful time delay. Which despite having access, or rather, having all the data, I feel the information access part is still extremely time consuming, and then it's a pain point across the organization, right? So this is the way I would like to sum up, just to set the context, in terms of the modern information access challenge. It's not about the data capture and store. I think the technology around that space, especially with increasing amount of digitalization and digital transformation efforts, I think every company, they have ton loads of data. We have the ability or the technology to capture very high velocity, very high volume data, right? Streaming, real time, near real time, batch, whatever it is. I think we have all the capabilities on extremely high level of maturity in those spaces around capture and store. But the challenge is more around on the consumption layer. The more the data you have, it's extremely difficult, for any common user to get access to it, in terms of the timeliness of the data, how soon is it available, how closer it is available for the decision makers, and all that. I think that's where we have uh, pretty much the challenge is more on this space, right? Um, and the other thing is also something which is very, very important, a concept which I just wanted to highlight. I'm sure many of you would even know this. It's about something called the findability and discoverability. The findability is you already have, it is you have a question, and then you're just trying to get an answer to that question. How easy it is for someone to locate the known data. And the discoverability is, especially with in a big data environment, right? I think sometimes even you don't even know, only when you look at the answer, oh, I didn't even know this existed, right? I think those kind of stuff, how easy it is for a normal user to discover insights which they didn't even know existed, right? I think both these aspects are extremely important in the information access application, right? How does that really support the findability as well as the discoverability of the information, right? So what's the solution? I mean, I think that's a very, very quick summary on, just to set the context around the problem space. And then, before we get into our approach around, sort of finding a solution to this. Any questions so far? Maybe I'll just take a quick pause here. Any questions? Great. So let me jump into, with this context on the problem space, how are we, thinking of a solution aspect, right? So what we're really saying is when your users have momentary questions on data, right? Don't let them overwhelm with large reports. I mean, so we're saying, can they really get an answer, for that particular question? Just like how we would ask searching, but much more than that, which again, I'll just show you what do I really want, but, much more than that, right? So why can't we just have them, just like, say, for example, if two human beings or two knowledge, I mean, if we are talking, how would I consume that? Rather, how do I really talk to the other person? The way I ask questions, get information, I assimilate it. I think, can we really replicate an experience, if not exactly, at least, closer to that? Right? Especially now we have technologies, as I said, because as I said, remember the fundamental driver for the whatever the solution approach which I'm suggesting is conversational AI, which is to do with text, voice, as well as language understanding, people really conversing, right? So I think with that, the baseline technology, can we use those technologies to solve the problems, the information access problems, which I just mentioned, right? So can we just have them just ask how the way they would ask of a human being, right? So these are just like some examples. In fact, all these are questions, which we have implemented for some of our customer solutions, right? So something like, for a health insurance customer, rather than them, trying to interpret a dashboard or a report, can we let them ask questions like this? Hey, what is the incurred claim ratio on this particular plan on this? So this is the way, we ask questions, or rather, even when we are trying to consume, or rather looking at a metric, we have a question in our mind, I think something like this, and we are just trying to convert that in a form, we try to interpret a metric or a report and get the answer. That's what is really happening in our cognitive space, right? I think, we have only have questions, we're just trying to get answers, trying to interpretation. Rather, can we just ask the question this way, in a very simple interface, with examples like these, right? So I think this particular technology, I mean, it's really, I mean, I have given a statistics, from Gartner. More and more, there is an increasing usage of, search and natural language-based queries like these. They are becoming very common, or rather, one of the important component in business intelligence and analytics. I think that's what is really happening. So the solution, which I'm going to show in a very short period of time, it's more around these concepts, or rather it goes in this flavor. Letting people, letting users ask questions in English to get answers. And then it's not just limited to a few questions, anything. I mean, if you have a data set, can the application really let the user ask any question and get the answer, right? So that's the very, very high level, example of it. Say, for example, and to put it in perspective, right? So if this is the question I have in my mind, so I am a sales manager, I have a dashboard which gives me the performance metrics, right? So if my question is, hey, I have a team of sales reps, who are taking care of the business. Which region is really doing well? I have rolled out a new product. I'm trying to find out, hey, how is this product really selling in the market, right? So I may have a dashboard like this, and I may try to get this answer to this particular question by trying to interpret this dashboard, right? I think that is one way of doing it. That's the most common way, which is prevalent today, right? Instead, can I replicate it with an experience like this, like how we interact with human beings, in a chat interface? Hey, which region is doing well? Can it really give me the pointed answer? Hey, it is the region West with the sale of this much amount of dollars, and then this is how it is doing. And what is interesting, or rather, or the next, this is where something that is similar to human experience becomes valuable. It's not just about providing an answer. Can they really go the extra mile and provide an insight? Hey, by the way, uh, it's been trending down the last 6 months, or it has been going up, or rather, this is what is really contributing. That kind of insight is what really, which we normally find very common in a human experience. Can we really try to do something very similar? Even with when we in our information access, right? I think that's the high level idea behind conversation insights. Can we really try to replicate, the what you see on the left, like how we are doing it today, trying to get, trying to interpret dashboards or reports, trying to get an answer. Can I really replicate that, with a conversation interface, right? So the other reason is also, right. I mean, so we have been used to reports, dashboards, Excel sheets, whatnot, right? How is this BI space or the analytics space? Is there a question? I'm hearing some background noise. I don't know if it was a question or someone talking. Okay, so how is this? I mean, even if we take a pause and then just take a step back and ask, hey, how is information access going to be, say, like 5 years from now, or in another 10 years? How is this technology going to really mature, right? That's where I mean, definitely there's going to be something which similar to the example which I just showed few slides back, how we evolve from the traditional mainframe reports to Excel sheets, to dashboards, to smartphones and all that. How is this going to be into the future? Definitely, that is going to be a very interesting way, we consume information, right? So our solution is kind of, one way of perhaps, this could be the conversation insights could be the way, you never know, right? Because we, for an AI first generation, definitely some of these technologies are really going to come handy to solve this information access problem, right? So our approach, again, at Purpose Lane, and I like, what we call is we have a platform called Kia, right? So it is, we call it as top tier data, with Kia. So Kia is like the application. Once you train Kia on a data set, it can start answering questions. If you're really wondering, why the name Kia. See, Kia is by the way, I mean, just a quick tidbit, right, of information. It's a parrot species. Supposedly, these parrot species are supposed to have very high level of IQ, one of the smartest bird species available. And then, so we thought, okay, we'll give this name to our solution as well, top tier data with Kia. So just to, again, to give an example, this is the way, users consume information. So at this point, let me give a quick intro, or rather, into the application before I come back to the slides, right? So the way it happens is, say I have, so this is a very simple interface, I have, I mean, it's a very simple search bar, or, I mean, there is also other interfaces. I'll just show you very quickly. I mean, this particular data set, it has information about our, the resource consumption. We consume AWS, or, and Azure for many of our infrastructure needs, right? So say, for example, if I ask questions like, hey, how is my expense? So it tells me, hey, this is the amount of money you spent last month, and it has gone down by 10%. And then this is the average. This is the way it has been trending daily. So in this, say for example, now I also want to ask another follow up. Hey, I'm looking at, say, this year. So now, it just gives me a trend. So all these kind of questions, which you normally have, right? That's why I was giving you this example around, how we normally do it today, either in an Excel sheet or dashboard or a metric, they just have different charts to interpret it. And we have a question, and then we try to interpret a metric and get the answer. Can we? We're just trying to reverse the process here. Rather, if whatever questions we have in mind or whatever information access we really need, can we just ask that in simple English, right? And behind the scenes, what Kia is really doing is it takes these utterances, the questions which you asked in English, it converts it into in an equivalent database query, and then brings the data back, and then all these are generated on the fly. I mean, it is not limited to. I mean, I can even say, hey, so so it just breaks it down by the different teams, and then how they are consuming all these stuff. So there are like 6 different teams in that. These questions, it's not limited by. It is only limited by the data set it is trained on. Which in this case is, as I said, the infrastructure data. So this is what we really call as a very quick introduction to what I call as the conversational insights, where you train the application, or rather, in this case, Kia, on any data set, it starts responding to those questions, right? I mean, it's purely just asking the question in English. And of course, this works in voice, where somebody can just click the microphone and then ask the questions. That's one of the common way. I mean, we have done an implementation for healthcare, very large healthcare chain in the US. The doctors, while they're handling patients, they just it's available on a tablet and a mobile phone. They just click and then ask the question. Hey, show me the patients treated with, say, doxycycline 10 mg for influenza, and that's they just ask the question in voice, and then it responds back, very similar to your Alexa or Google Home. And since you also have a visualization, so the tablet kind of visuals kind of appear in the tablet or the computers, and then there is a audio summary which is also played, right? So this is one very simple example of a conversational insight, or rather, where the users have an ability to just ask the questions in simple English. Any questions? So I'll show a lot more examples, in terms of in different scenarios, and what is, there's a lot of other features, which are possible within this platform and all that, quickly. So I thought I'll just give a quick sneak peek of what we're really talking about. It's basically your ability to ask questions in English, right? So now just coming back to this, again, as I said, I'll definitely go back to a lot more demos, than the application very soon, right? Um, so as I said, here's an example. So in terms of, say for a health insurance customer, this is the way they ask some of the questions. Hey, daily trade of policies in a particular state and a particular time frame, and then it gives them all these statistics, right? So what exactly is Kia? This is the way our definition of this application. It is a smart, knowledgeable virtual data analyst that can mine. We have gone up to, 1 billion rows of data. I mean, obviously, that is one of the problems, which we are trying to solve is how to really make this scalable, and or rather mine very large volume of data and still come back with these insights, right? And the most important part is the last phrase, in the language you speak. I mean, right now, it is in English. So the approach is like what I was telling you. Can we try to replicate a human-like experience, with assistant, which we call as data analyst, which we call as Kia, right? So you train Kia on any data sets, and then it starts, and then just provide this very simple interface. Either it is a search bar, or there are a few more the ways to get the answers. I'll just show in a very short period of time. That's at a very high level is what Kia is, right? Or in other words, remember, I was giving you this flow some time back, the way we consume information, right? So when users have question, they ask a trusted source, get answers, the cycle goes on, and then, we take action. So our idea with Kia is, can I replace all that green area, with Kia? So where when the user really has an information need, can they just ask Kia and get the answers? So that's the whole idea behind, or rather, we just try to abstract that part, trying to make Kia as a virtual data analyst. Right? So, or in other words, this is another way to look at it. How do I turn data? It could be sitting in a database, or it could be in a very simple CSV file, Excel sheets, or from applications to APIs and all that. How do I turn this into simple question and answer? That's what the application can, the platform really helps you achieve, right? So how do we do that? Very, very simple steps. If I have to oversimplify, it's more like take this data, train it on Kia. When I keep using this word train, what do I really mean by that? I'll just quickly show you, and then you get the answers, right? Yeah, so this is also something, which is very important. The data can be anywhere. It could be, we support almost all the popular, data sources, from there. It not just necessarily from CSV, JSON, or XML. Any of those large data stores, and Kia can be trained, source the data from there, and then and for you to get the answers, right? And at the same time, for anyone who has worked in data, definitely the data grows over a period of time. The frequency which data mutates, either it could be streams, real time, near real time, batch, end of the day batch, or on request, or it could even be something you have it on once in a while you're getting a new data set. How all those ways in which you get the data, the same data, as it flows through your data store, it can be used to train the application, and then for get answers, so that the answers which Kia provides is always the near real time, using the data which is current and the most latest and greatest, right? So there are multiple ways. I just showed you one example, which is we call as the question widget or the search bar, right? And then there are a few other applications. It's available in a mobile app. It's available in a chat application. The mobile app is something which I feel it's going to be very useful. Say you are meeting a customer or you're traveling at that particular time. Sometimes you have an email saying, hey, someone is complaining about something. What do we normally do these days? We just call someone, right? And then try to get the answer, or I log in, go to an application, someone is complaining about defects, or the status on a particular project item and all that, are talking about some sales numbers. Immediately I have to open my computer, look at my Excel sheet, or look at my any other application to get the answer. Rather, just like the way we are messaging our fellow individuals, can I really message, or rather have a chat, engage in a conversation with Kia and try to get that answer, right? That's the scenario we are trying to bring in here, right? So the ecosystem consists of these different products. Again, the studio, which helps you train the data, the question widget, the mobile, as well as the chat applications. I'll show each one of these very quickly. Right. So what exactly it is? It is a low-code framework. So before I get into this, right, let me go back to another demo here. Any questions so far? Okay. So this is the Kia Studio application. I have a whole bunch of, just like, you can equate it to your, if you have used Tableau, Power BI, or any of this. Studio kind of helps you train the application on, train Kia on a particular data set, and then for you to roll out an instantiation in an application, right? So I can say, for example, I can go and add a new data source, and then the data can come from any of these ways. It could be from a very simple CSV like this. Say I have a data set like this. If I have to get answers from this particular CSV, I can just in a fact of like few minutes, I can train this whole CSV to Kia and then start getting answers in one of those applications, right? Or in a typical enterprise setup, it is not necessarily CSVs we live with. We have very large data warehouses, big data environments and all that. So definitely, we can connect to each one of those, try to get an answer, try to source the data for Kia, or it could even connect to different applications. You have your CRM, Salesforce, whatever it is. Any of those applications. Say for example, your tickets are sitting in, say, Jira or Azure DevOps or Trello board, wherever it is. Those, it can still get those data, and then for it to train so that it can answer questions, right? So these are the different ways in which you can really connect Kia to. So I have, given the one of time, right, I'm just going to quickly jump into. So once I have onboarded a lot of data sets here. There is quite a bit of sample ones, and then there are. So let me take one. Say for example, let me take the sales data sets, right? So I can go and use this chat application I have. Remember, I told you the search is like a very simple search bar widget, right? Very similar to a search engine. You have an ability to ask questions. The chat, um, it's like you can equate it to something like your Slack, Teams, or Google Chat and all that. It is a chat interface. The only thing is here you're going to engage in a conversation with the smart assistant on this. So I have the sales data sets, right? So this is what I have. There is a whole bunch of attributes. So when you really train K, it has all this information, idea about this data, right? So now I can say for let me start engaging in the conversation here. Right? So there is quite a bit of questions I have. So I start something with, hey, right? So it's, as I said, anything. Say for example, I can even say I narrowed down to. So once it provides this answer, it is also giving me a few options, right? Since we talked about a maximum, it is asking, by the way, would you like to know the city, or rather, which had the least amount of sales as well, right? So it gives you another one. So now let me go in a sequence, the way we would normally do any analysis, right? So say for example, I'm sales manager. I'm looking at the performance for my team, for say the last quarter or the last team, right? So I'll just say, so it gives me some information. Hey, this is the amount of sales. It has gone up 64% compared to, since we're talking about a quarter, it says, hey, it has gone up 64% compared to the previous quarter. It is giving me quite a bit of, insights. Since we're talking about quarter, it shows me the last quarter months, and then, this is the average amount of sales and all that, right? And it also gives me something. Hey, do you like to look at this, say, by a few dimensions? Hey, would you like to break it down by, say, category, right? So the same sales in the last quarter, now I have an ability to say, it says, hey, your technology is one, which is really doing well or almost equal to furniture. Now, this could make me think, hey, if this is really technology, what else, I could do is say for example, I see that it's been doing well. I just want to look and say, I have another question that I'm asking. Hey, show me how the technology space has been, right? So it now, it gives me a trend of how, you have all these options. It just comes with it. You can filter and slice and dice the data, look at it more granularly and all that, right? So it says, I asked for a trend. What it's really showing is it's daily trend. Say if I really want to break it down to say I want to look at a weekly trend, it's completely. You can see all these questions and the charts are rendered at runtime. The secret sauce, I mean, rather, or rather, the key element which is really happening behind the scenes is why the questions, which we are asking in English, so the secret sauce is basically the one, which understands this question, converts it into query, and then, comes back with these responses. That is what is really, it's happening behind the scenes, right? Um, so This chat interface is one, it's one way of consuming this, or rather, one of the Kia interfaces where you can really engage in a conversation with Kia, just like your, the favorite collaboration platforms. It could be Microsoft Teams or Slack or anything, right? Say, for example, I'm just looking at this now. I really know that, hey, there is a peak or something is dipping. I want to engage in a conversation with my team, right? So I have a sales guy who's responsible for technology sales. What do we normally do in today's scenario? We'll take a screenshot, send it, email it to somebody, and then ask them, hey, what do you think about this? Or rather, so that's the way the interaction kind of, mostly that's the way it really happens. And then, they will respond back in email. Then they might be asking, hey, what are you really looking at? Or we engage in a meeting, we do a screen share. That's the way, we kind of, the collaboration kind of happens, right? So what we're really saying is, why can't the collaboration, happen within this platform itself, right? So for this particular, if I'm really looking at this metric, I can really invite somebody. So I can bring in one of my, say my friend here, and then, I can bring it, say for example, if he's the one responsible for the technology stake, I can engage in a conversation. Both of us, we see the same results. I mean, so say for example, when Alex, he would have got the ping, if he's online, and he would also ask the same question. He would look at the same data, and now, both of us are engaged in a conversation to resolve certain issues, or to answer questions on this particular stuff. Say for example, the context of, say, technology sales, right? That is the idea behind, can we really, instead of going through the traditional platforms, where we really share the information, kind of, gets shared through emails and telephone calls and all that, can we really have the conversation right in one place where everybody sees the same data? And then, see, as I said, the fundamental problem, which it really tries to solve, is how do we reduce the time taken for information access, right? So as I said, these days, like, it's a very common scenario where people spend days or hours or even, weeks to getting access to data, or rather, with so many emails going back and forth. Can we really try to reduce the time, and then, engage in a conversation on a particular data, with the people who really care about the data, right? I think that's the whole idea, or rather, the thought process behind that, having a chat platform like this. It does quite a bit of stuff. I mean, just like how you would do it in the Twitter or anything. If this is something, you really want to come back, you can add a tag here. I can give something like technology. It adds, you can have hashtags. Hashtags really helps you search later and all that, right? If this is something, you want to save it, you can make this as your favorite. And then, so you have your favorites, and I'll just come to storyline later, in terms of what is top, right? So these are all, like, all my history of all the questions which I had asked in the past. All those things, I really do not, I mean, it's almost like your search history. If something, you really want to come back to it, you have the history of, the questions which you ask, and then, anything which, say, for example, very common KPIs, which you normally track in a very, in a frequent manner. All those things, you can make it that as your favorite. You can, so that, you can come back and ask those questions or those metrics, whenever you want, right? So this is one approach to, or rather, one way of looking at it through the chat interface. See, the same one, which I said, which is like the search interface, right? Let me show you another data. Say, for example, I can take you something around, say, the insurance. Yeah, this is I mean, something which we have again done for one of our customers. This is on the insurance space, right? How does this data look? Say, yeah, while it's trying to load that, so even here, it's like the whole bunch of questions. I can ask, hey, show me the customer who bought something. Any particular, on whatever the data elements, you can just ask those questions, and then, it's just going to come back to the answer, right? I think that, the whole application, if you really look at it, with the few examples I showed you, whether it is the cost, AWS cost information or the sales data, insurance data. Absolutely, you can train it on any of the data sets, and then it is agnostic to the data. All it really cares about, a bunch of dimensions and measures, and then it can respond back. Right. So there is one very interesting aspect of language interface. I'll just show you here, which I'm just when we talk to people, one thing, especially when it comes to conversations, is what we call as the vocabulary. Sometimes you may refer to a word in one way. Say, I'll give an example here. Say, you take the cost information here, so these are all the data attributes. There is a date, there is an application service, a whole bunch of data elements here. What being not everybody would refer to this particular column as an application. Somebody might like to call it as a cost center, or they may call it as app or a system or team. So you have an ability to define a whole bunch of vocabulary here, and that way, when Kia responds, somebody can ask the question, and hey, show me the expense by application. So let me go back to that. Or I can just change it to say team by team. It knows team and application, both of them, they mean the same thing. And then, it kind of, understands the vocabulary. And this is a very, very essential part of it, especially when we're talking about a conversational interface. I mean, even on a data management perspective, right, what we call is the business terms. The one very interesting problem, or rather, very, very important problem in the data management cycle is around data glossary. Right? The way the business people would refer to a data element versus how it is really being referred by the technology team, or how it is actually the data attribute really exists within a data. I mean, it would be very, very different. Normally, you would solve this using a data catalog, and so that there is a mapping of the business terms to the data attribute, and then there is try to establish a lineage and all that, right? So even here, when it comes to conversation, it's not just about the data attribute alone. Any of your users, they could refer to a particular element in so many different ways. Or especially these days, you also have abbreviations. Say something like, one very good example I can tell you is, BU, and it is in a healthcare implementation. We have the doctors, they call it as BUN, which is nothing but blood urea nitrogen. Or the other challenges, we normally have is with the drug names and all that. Somebody could refer it as 10 milligrams or 10 mg, or somebody would say, so you have abbreviations, you have the different dialects, so many different ways in which, the synonyms and all that. Those all add to the complexity of a conversational application, just like how, we normally encounter that when we talk to humans, right? So we solve that problem, with having a vocabulary. So, for every attribute, you have an ability to define the synonyms. That way, the application kind of really understands, hey, both of them, they really mean the same thing. When someone asks for information, whether it is via as a team or application, that, hey, it's both of them, they refer to the same thing. So it's basically an application, right? So that's, I mean, you have ways to solve the vocabulary problem. I mean, that's what we really do. And another example I can show you, or rather a very important feature, which I can show you. See, when you are doing an analysis like this, right? As I said, Kia helps you get answers, and then so why do we even sometimes when we doing an analysis, right? Usually, one way to do that is you are looking at a predefined dashboard and looking at different metrics and trying to get some answers. Normally, I mean, especially if you're doing your own say analysis for a presentation, or you're going to tell a story to somebody and all that, or producing a research report and all that, you do a whole bunch of analysis, look at different metrics, slice and dice the data in so many different ways, and then finally you pick and choose few ones, and then which you normally use for a presentation. I'm sorry, was that a question?
I'm sure we do.
Hello. Okay, wasn't sure if that was a question. Anyway, I'll just go ahead. So the way you would use these metrics or these answers to create a storyline or make a presentation, right? So we're kind of saying, hey, once you get all these answers, is there a way we can assemble that to really, or what we call as a storyline, right? So say I'll take this very simple example of say going back to the insurance data. Let me switch to say something like, let me take this, and I'm going to use the search interface here. So, say for example, I have a presentation tomorrow, where I have to present my sales performance to a whole bunch of people, right? So I start with, hey, saying, I mean, the reason I keep using these years is because I don't think we have the data as this year and all that. So this is what I have for 2020. So I'm doing an analysis on, say, the sales in the year 2020. So what I do is I like this answer, so I really want to use this, so I can create a story, right? So I can say that, hey, so I create a story and say that, hey, this. So yeah, I can do some simple formatting and all, and then I can add it here. But now instead of the last quarter, I also look and say, hey, let me also look at all the quarters in 20. So this is another piece of information which I really want to share to people. So I add it here. I go back and add it, and then I'm just gonna add it to the story. So now. Yeah, I'm responsible for a particular region, so I'm just asking for this particular state. Show me, I'm just looking at the appliance sales here. So I have some number, so I also add this to my story. So it's like a whole bunch of metrics, I'm just saying, hey, these are all something which I really want to um, say who. So this is one very interesting aspect I just want to highlight here, right? Think about it. My question was on who, okay? So the application was smart enough to know that, hey, we are really talking about a person now. So it comes back to the response, in this case, it is a customer name. So those smartness are built within the application. So when you ask the question like when, it knows, okay, so you're really looking at a time period, it will respond back with a time answer. Or where, it knows, okay, you're really talking about a geographical location, it will respond back with any attribute which is related to geographical location. So those kind of smartness, I mean, I just wanted to highlight here, since we asked a question on who, it is smart enough to tell me, there is a customer name. That's what you might be interested in. Like, that's the way it is. It has all those intelligence to respond back that way, right? So, say for example, let me also add this to my storyboard. So you go like this. Say tomorrow. I mean, in the presentation, absolutely, no way to cut and paste this. In the presentations, PowerPoint slides or anything like that, right? One drawback of when you do that in a slide is all those are potentially, it could be images, right? And when you're really presenting, the data could have changed, and definitely, there is no way, you could bring back those, the most recent data, right? So now I'm just going back to, so here is the story board I created. And the way, you would present it is, okay, so just like how you would present it, this is my sales story. I had a annotation here, and in fact, it can read out. I mean, there is a play button. It can play the whole story. It will play back. With the voice response and all that. So I can use this to navigate and then present it. The key thing here is, as I was telling you, as you're presenting, it has an ability to go and get the most recent data. These are not just images, or a point in time information. As the most current data, be available even for all your data. That's why we really call it as data stories, and you can use this as a as a different alternate way to present it rather than your traditional way of doing it through static images in presentations and all, right? So that's one feature, which Kia, one very cool feature which Kia really, comes up, which is called the storyboard. Right. In fact, this is heavily used by some of our customers, especially doctors. Um, you know, Kind of eliminates the need to make use of presentations out of the application and all that. Right? So I was talking to you about the smartness around who and all that. There is one more feature I just wanted to highlight before I just quickly. I know we are. Um, so here is an example I'll show you. One in conversations. Especially when we talk to human beings, one very important aspect sits around context. So, say for example, I ask this question. This is the same. So it gives me this information, right? And then, so now I ask, I can continue the conversation. How about see? This is what we really mean by having the context. So since we're talking about the last quarter of 2020, and it gave me, I just asked for sales, on this particular time frame. So it gave me the sales for everything. Now the next question I had was, how about California? It kind of understands, hey, we are talking about sales in this particular time frame. All it does is applying the filter on the subset, on California. So you can really look at it. It's the same time frame, which is in the last quarter. All it did was, applying a filter on California. So it kind of, so now, I can even continue from here and say that, hey, um, keep on, just like how I would have, in a conversation with human, you can continue the conversation from one and then, to another. The application kind of remembers the context and then, takes you along that way. I mean, these are all some very essential features, or rather, in a conversational interface, right? I think Kia is very smart enough to carry that context. And say the other example I was telling you, say for example, here I ask, hey, so that's what I mean, since the question was around the when, it knows and understands, okay, the responses has to be more on a time frame. It responds back to the date. Hey, this is a particular day in which, you had it. It can, so the questions can be like, when, or you can ask which month, which year, which quarter, all that. So it kind of knows, okay, it has to respond back, with a time period of time, concept, context. Or rather, when it is, as I said, when I say where, it knows there is a geography. It's talking about a geographical location. It will respond back with an attribute. If there is an attribute, related to geography, it will respond back. Those kind of smartness is what, those are all some very cool things, which Kia kind of brings. Any questions on the demo? I just have a few more slides. I'll just go back to the presentation. Anything, any comments? Okay, so just the last few slides, right? I mean, so what I just showed you, what exactly is Kia as a platform, right? I mean, it is completely white label, whether it is the search interface or the chat application. Omni-channel, available in mobile, web, and it comes with all these features, which basically what this really helps us, with the time to market. It's like, in fact, when I say minutes, we really mean that in the sense for you to quickly onboard very small data sets, even if it is Excel sheets or databases. It's just like you can have an application running in very, very few minutes through the Kia Studio without absolutely, without writing any code. Or the larger implementations, why do we even say days? When we go to large enterprises, they have the data already sitting in a data warehouse. So we don't spend time within the application, the Kia as such. For us to source the data, setting up the data pipeline and all. That's where it takes some time. So once we have that data pipeline set up, it kind of Kia is able to source data from there and then start responding to questions. So the primary objective of this platform, or it is around the time to market. And so, and more than that, completely these dynamic interfaces kind of gives you all the flexibility to ask any kind of questions, not necessarily. See, one common example I have seen, especially being worked in having built very large business intelligence applications about it. So you have a dashboard. Sometimes you just look at it. There is not much option. You ask people, hey, I just need this metric, this is missing. So that becomes a project request, right? So someone has to go and update the dashboard, create the metric, add it, and then those kind of stuff. It really costs a lot of time and money. That's what we are trying to avoid it here. In the sense, it is absolutely with this free format interface. All the visualizations or any metric kind of generates is it generated on the fly for who are the users, because it's very difficult to anticipate data needs, right, or the information needs. So that dynamic interface, or kind of really helps all kinds of users to get whatever answers they're really looking for. And just I mean, I showed some of these features during the demo as well, right? I mean, quite a bit of rich features which Kia brings in. So what is Kia? I mean, in a very, if I have to summarize, I think it's the very simple conversational interface, the ability to ask questions in the language you speak. Of course, it's in English, and in fact, one thing which I didn't show was much on the voice part. It is extremely, it has a very powerful voice interface where the user can ask the question in English as well as even it can respond back. So in fact, voice brings its own challenges around accuracy and all that. I think, especially as I said, in our experience being around the healthcare space, healthcare brings its own challenges. It's not just simple English constructs. It's also about the medical vocabulary. It's about the drug names, the acronyms, homophones. All these challenges kind of play a big role. And I mean, to me, I'll tell you, I think that's where some of our Microsoft technologies really comes in handy for us. We were able to achieve some very, very good accuracy levels. And of course, it goes through a process. Nothing comes out of the box, right? The accuracy is only as good as the amount of training data, which we are able to feed to the models. So, but definitely, in fact, the custom speech and the language understanding libraries and Azure Cognitive Services are like, I mean, there are some research reports which says the accuracy is closer to human comprehension levels. Right? So we have had some very, very good results using these technologies. And yeah, just to sum it up, I mean, all these, I mean, Kia kind of runs on top of Azure. Pretty much, we make use of the speech services, the language understanding, Lewis, and all the other Azure components, either for data storage. And of course, in fact, Kia can also be made available in Microsoft Teams as a T-bot. So that way, right, I mean, you can engage in a conversation with Kia, within Microsoft Teams as well, right? And quite a bit of very good have had some very good applications and use cases done for some very interesting ones. The BCA and Mars Veterinary Health. Daimler was one of our earliest ones, where we did something like that for the Daimler trucks. For the factory floor, they could ask questions like, hey, what front wheel suspension was used in this particular model. Those kind of conversations. See, the use case pattern has been more like this. Wherever they needed a hands-free mode, access to information in a hands-free mode. Say, for example, in a factory floor or the doctors and all that. When they are wearing the gloves, or can they? That makes it difficult for somebody to make use of a computer. Those scenarios are kind of I'm not saying that is the only scenario, but some very good, some where these kind of conversation interfaces really become very useful, where someone can just say just like how we would talk to Siri or Alexa, right? Definitely there is no way we're going to expose the enterprise data to Alexa. So if I have that as an iPad app, hey, can I really if I'm wearing gloves, or if I'm not really but to easily access the computer, can I just ask, speak, and get the answers, right? I think that's those scenarios become very, very suitable for this particular technology and use cases. So just to sum it up, the last lines, I mean, the way I see that, some of the common traits are that for the information access in the coming days. I think definitely they need to cater to these four aspects. One is it has to be very, very simple. As I said, for all our personal data needs, we have all these beautiful, very powerful search engines. Definitely, we're going to expect some very similar or better experience even for the enterprises. How do we really achieve it? In a very, very simple interface, right? Um, Diverse set of users with improved digital transformation digitization efforts, right? I mean, you're going to have so much amount of data. How do you really make this data available to your entire user base, right? With can there be one application? So today, you have so many different applications catering to so many different user personas. Can there be one, which really takes care of, almost pretty much most of the users, right? I think that one metadata is going to be very critical part. I mean, when I say metadata, even in my case, I showed you these examples around the vocabulary because in a traditional data management, we would have called that as a data glossary, which involved your, the data dictionary, the business terms, the business rules, and all that. It's basically, it's nothing but the way, the different ways in which a business or the operations folks would refer to a data versus the technology folks. I think that's the challenge. Now, I mean, we're calling it as in the modern world, we're calling it as, especially in the conversational AI world, we're calling it as a vocabulary. Vocabulary is nothing but, there is a term that particular term could be referred in so many different ways. By my business user would call it in one way, the end customer would call it in one way. I would have stored the data in a different way within the. So how do I really bring in the synergy of the which all of them mean the same thing? When I really ask a question. So metadata is definitely any application that supports extremely good metadata management. I think that's going to definitely what it really helps is it helps you, when I say discover, it helps people to ask questions in the way they are comfortable with, and then of course the trust factor. For me to understand, I know that hey, this is what I really this element means. Right? I think that's the fourth point is also something which is very, very essential. You can see that in most of the other products today, which is to bring in collaboration because the data or information is not. We don't normally consume that in silos. We interact with our fellow team members and a whole bunch of user population. So definitely, so if you take any of the applications, say Figma, Adobe, everybody, they're all bringing in this collaboration feature where you can engage in a conversation, right? Rather than using the traditional emails for communication. Right? So collaboration is also going to be one very, very important feature where everybody, all the stakeholders look at the same piece of information, and then they work towards getting the information, and as well as eventually using that for decision making, taking actions. Right? And definitely, that's where it helps. And our low code platform, as I said, it's very, very easy to get up and running in a very, very short period of time. I think that's the whole idea behind this low code framework. And of course, it has quite a bit of stuff. I mean, one thing which I didn't show is all around. Say, for example, even today, if I quickly 2 minutes, I can just show you one more demo. It's around what we have is. Say the how I've been even so what we have done is even the way we have been using here this particular application, which is that itself is available as a bunch of questions. So if I really want to know how people are really using this application, right? That data itself is available here. So let me go here, ask this question. So even that, so there are like, this is the way, I mean, in my instance of this application, so all this usage information, it can say by username, I know who's using it, everything, all these comes out of the box, we kind of, the historical information on the usage of the product, all that. So basically the idea is any data, irrespective of whatever the data is, that can be trained on Kia and used to get answers, right? So that's the whole idea behind it. Um, so that's about it, and definitely, I mean, the way we engage with. So here's an email ID, and definitely would be more than happy, to have a follow-up discussion or any POCs, and we do engage in the, free POCs or for you to play around with with the use case and all that. Please be more than happy to engage in a follow-up conversation, And so, yeah, that's what Kia is about. Thank you. And maybe I'll pause here for some questions. Any questions or comments from anybody?
Hey,
There is some
I had a
question. Sorry. Hi, Shiva.
Yeah, hi.
There is some question on the chat, please. Could you check it,
Sure, yeah. Let me,
please? Sorry, Pradeep.
oh, wow.
yeah, no
Oh,
worries.
wow, that is quite a bit. Okay. Yeah, can you share the recording? Definitely. I mean, we could do that, right? Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, I think, yeah, she has already replied. Sorry. Would this work only for selected set of questions? No. So yeah, Pradeep, definitely not. I mean, that's a question which we get from many of the users whenever we do this. It's not limited to. It is not hard coded for any standard set of questions. Or sometimes they ask us, hey, if I have a different question, do you have to do any work? No, it doesn't work that way. Definitely not. That's the mode which we are trying to break. So today you have a dashboard with say 5 or 6 metrics. If there is one more we need to add, it becomes an additional project, right? I think that's a problem we're trying to solve. No, it's absolutely all Kia cares about is only the data attributes. All possible combinations, any way you can ask, it can respond back. Absolutely not a standard set of questions. Can we integrate this portal? Yeah, yeah, that is also something. Yes, see, in fact, Salesforce is one very common implementation we do. We source it from Salesforce because the CRM data. We source it from Salesforce and provide insights. Say something like, hey, as simple as how many leads did I have last month, and give me the phone number for particular this one, or show me the leads who haven't had any activity in the last 2 months. Maybe that output you may want to run a campaign. All these are kind of very very common CRM use cases, which we do. What Kia also does is this. So once you have an answer, say for example, it says, hey, show me the, you're running a query, gives you some output. You also have an ability to take this data back into Salesforce. If you really want to run a campaign or you want to do something else, those kind of reverse integrations are also possible. I mean, we call it as that is a very interesting topic, which is getting popular in the data engineering field today. It's called reverse ETL. So even that is possible. So yeah, Salesforce, absolutely, it is possible. So how will this on large data sets? Are there any limitations? No, I mean, we have implementations, which the maximum one, which we have, someone is on, they have to mute. So our largest implement, it goes up to say, I think 200 million rows of data, but definitely the technology is highly scalable. I mean, it supports in a distributed environment, supports scalability. So, I mean, we have tested it up to, I think 500 million is the max, but the technology, I mean, the volume is not a constraint, I would say. Any other questions from anybody? Any comments? See, as I said, I mean, even if we need a deep dive, if you want to know more about the technology or more about a specific use case, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to engage in a follow up. There is one more. How we will compare Power BI similar features like Q&A with KR? Okay. See, Power BI, I mean, again, definitely Power BI is coming up with some of these stuff. But The thing is, even in Power BI, it is limited to the metrics which you're really creating. I mean, it is not 100% dynamic. Say I have a data set which has like some 50 different attributes, whole bunch of dimensions and measures and all that. I mean, Power BI's Q&A is still not, that dynamic to answer. I mean, it is still limited to the dashboards which you create, and you can ask questions within that dashboard, not anything which is still outside that and all. So definitely, that's where I think where Kia really comes in. It's like absolutely, as I said, it's a free format. On it doesn't care. It is not conformed to specific metrics and everything. All it knows is, hey, I know these data attributes. I can answer questions. That's the way, including the values and all that. That's the way it works. See, in fact, in a very very loose sense, the way we would like to. We've been writing blogs on this. It's like we call it as dashboards are dead, or long live the dashboards. See, I mean, that's not. I mean, just a very light way I would put it. But the idea is dashboards kind of limits you to a standard set of metrics. We just want to break that because every information user will have a different look, and we really make it dynamic. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time today. I hope it was useful, and have a good day. Good night, everybody.